every critic was reviewing this movie, so I thought, I should go see it. Right, bring on the tears.
You please, won't you please, please won't you be my neighbor?
Won't you be my neighbor? So Won't You Be My Neighbor is a documentary about Fred Rogers, the guy who read Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood from the 70s, basically to the early 2000s, or to 70s to 90s, basically that span. This movie just goes through the show, goes through his life, goes through what happens, how it was made. Yeah. Alright, I can't even talk. No one even plays this. It's just pretty much footage. How hard was this movie to make? Probably hard because you have to edit the whole thing. I can relate to big videos having to be edited. I can relate. Our 30-minute videos? No. Where do I start? Where do I start with Won't You Be My Neighbor? I have no idea where to start. I guess the way that... No idea. Alright, here, I'll start like this. This movie makes you think. God doesn't make you think. You watch this movie, you're thinking the whole time. Yeah. Alright, now since I like this movie, let's go on to the bad. Nothing. Now let's go on to the good. This movie is so well made. The score in this movie is so good. I love every song in the score. I love this score. And I even, as a person who watched Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, I actually know all about it now, because I watched this documentary. I know most of the episodes. I know basically how long the show ran, how many episodes there were. Yeah, his family, I know Mr. Rogers somewhat. I don't want to say I know him personally or anything, I know him. Now, if you were to take Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood and put it up against other kids shows like DC old shows, I don't know, like maybe shows on Fox Kids. If you were to compare Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood to those shows, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood deserves its own category. Kind of how this movie deserves its own category in my reviewing system. I am going to be counting it maybe on top 10 best or worst lists, comparing it against other movies that I've seen this year, like Infinity War or Black Panther. But it's going to be hard. This is the most different movie of the year. One movie earlier this year that came out, Black Panther, everybody thought that movie made a statement. It was a statement for black people. To have a whole cast of black people in a big superhero blockbuster. I felt that movie was a bit, like, it wasn't a message. It was just that the cast was black. I mean, I'm fine that that was the case. A lot of people really liked that movie. I really liked it, but I didn't find it to be amazing. Wait, actually, it is amazing. Whatever, it's not the best movie of the year. Here's what Won't You Be My Neighbor is. It's multiple statements. It's multiple messages, multiple that, packed into a documentary that I loved to the bone. It's so hard to word this movie. It's actually quite funny. It's actually relevant. And if I were to say that this movie's irrelevant, I'd sound like Rice Scum with all these diss tracks. But this movie, I just mentioned Rice Scum, diss tracks, in a Won't You Be My Neighbor review. I need to get off media. And in Won't You Be My Neighbor, what this movie does is that it's like messages from old times, messages from the 60s and 70s, that they really, or 60s, 70s, and 80s there, that not many people really, I guess, understood back then. Like, if you look at this movie, you see how people reacted to it, they say how people reacted to it. It doesn't feel like people realized what the movie was. Nowadays, I watch this movie, I watch, like, now, like, the message of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. This show, the show Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, cuts, like, it goes to some dark areas. There is a whole episode about assassination. There's a whole, I think it was promo for 9/11. There was a whole, there were multiple things about murder, people, like, the assassination, murder, people, children thinking they're Superman, then they can fly, and jumping off buildings and dying. These things happened back in the day. And other shows would just be like, funny, blah, it's so funny. Mr. Rogers was like, no, I'm going to talk about these subjects that children need to know about. Because a child is as complex as an adult. That's just, it is. People think they're dumb. You look at media, films like Sherlock Gnomes, films like Show Dogs, films like Woody Woodpecker. Those 3 films are prime examples of movies that capitalize on children to make a lazily ran, lazily made movie that's just like, if the excuse it's made for kids, that's the worst excuse ever now. Because it's made for kids, kids are as complex as adults. That there shouldn't be a line between a kids movie and an adult movie. Technically, I guess an adult movie with inappropriate sexual murder, blood, stuff like that, maybe that shouldn't be shown to a kid. But I do think that the line is drawn so thick between child and adult, and I think now after watching this movie, Fred Rogers has a point. That shouldn't be. You should be able to have adults be able to relate to kids' subjects, and kids be able to relate to adult subjects. Not all subjects work in there, but I think that an adult could watch Sherlock Gnomes and then maybe criticize it, like thinking, this movie should be good. And if someone's like, oh, it's for kids, then it's like, that shouldn't matter. The only excuse that can work is an adult movie saying it's made for adults. That can work because some movies are made for adults. Other movies are made for kids. Pixar is the best example of a company that really is just, some people say it's made for good. In fact, my sister was telling me how she really didn't like The Incredibles 2. I'm perfectly fine with that if you didn't like that movie. I loved it, but she was giving all the problems, and she said at her work, she was giving everybody the problems, and they said this one excuse: it's made for kids. That excuse, let alone, it pisses me off because it's made for kids. Adults should be able to sympathize and watch it too. One thing I did, so there's one point in this movie, people start making parodies off of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. Those parodies kind of angered me in the theater. So I saw Mr. Rogers actually talk about that he didn't find those parodies offensive. But then the media started reacting. Some people were saying that Mr. Rogers ruined a generation because he said that kids were special and that kids didn't have to work to be special. They're just special. I actually relate to that. That the media makes up the dumbest excuse to find a way to hate something. That's media nowadays. That's what happens nowadays. I see that with every movie. I see the cast of Ocean's 8 getting mad at the critics to Ocean's 8 because it's women. They're like, oh my gosh, it's just white men giving this movie bad reviews. And I see that as just a dumb excuse to find a reason why there's maybe something bad, maybe something good, to find an excuse. Maybe the excuse is, it's bad, deal with it, or it's good, deal with it. Because in the end, Won't You Be My Neighbor is such a craftedly amazing documentary. I'm not even a fan of documentaries, but I love this movie. It was so well made, so well done. I absolutely loved it. It makes me look at Mr. Rogers and think, that guy just saw the best of all of us. He saw what good entertainment was, and just, it was amazing. There's one line at the beginning of this movie where he says that he saw television and he saw people throwing pies into faces, and he said, why is this being used for that? By the end of this movie, you're either crying, or you're thinking, or you're trying to change your life. This movie, if anybody who is homophobic or racist, I think that if you know anybody who's homophobic, you need to recommend this movie to them. It will completely change their view. Won't You Be My Neighbor is the best movie of 2018 because Won't You Be My Neighbor is a 10. There have been 3 10s this year. Actually, Incredibles 2, I kind of backed down from that 10, but there have been 2 10s this year, too. Last year had none. And actually at the theater I was at for this, it had a cafe, it had everything. You go there, you eat lunch, you go into this theater, and they have these epic tables. You sit in a couch. It was awesome. Sadly, they don't play wide releases. Alright, so Won't You Be My Neighbor? Are you gonna see it? Have you seen it? What do you think? Let me know in the comment section below. Don't forget to subscribe. Thank you guys for watching. Goodbye. Ant-Man and the Wasp review will be on Friday. Spoiler talk maybe also on Friday. I'll work both on those. Maybe my spoiler talk will come on Monday, because guess what? I'm on another trip. Yay. But thankfully, maybe I'll get my spoiler talk out by Monday. Maybe it'll come out on Friday. I don't know yet. But see you guys next time. Goodbye.